Hello and welcome to the John Ark Show. Today's episode is called Why Do Companies and Criminals Love Living in Florida? We've done some research and we found out why Florida is so popular with companies, criminals, and ordinary everyday citizens. Before we begin, I want to tell you that I want to encourage you to subscribe, like, follow, and comment on the show. Also, to tell you that the show is sponsored by Hollywood is Calling. It's a company which allows you to purchase live phone calls with your favorite celebrities. They have more than 100 celebrities to choose from. So you may want to buy a call for yourself or for someone you love. The prices range from $19.95 to $29.95. So give it a try. It's hollywoodiscalling.com. Now let's begin. Have you ever wondered why so many companies, criminals, and ordinary everyday people just love Florida? Well, we've looked into it and we've got some interesting things to tell you. For starters, Florida has no income tax, and that's a huge reason why so many corporations are moving from high tax states like Florida and California and relocating to Florida. Moving from New York and California and relocating to Florida. Secondly, Florida is a very pro-business state, and they pass a lot of legislation designed to help companies operate there in a very reasonable fashion. Third, Florida is a great weather state. You know, unlike California, you don't have to worry about earthquakes or firestorms or mudslides or any of that nonsense. And as far as the Northeast goes, you know, with their incredible snowstorms, their ice storms, their terrible driving conditions. Once you leave all that and you go down to Florida, it's like a breath of fresh air. Another thing that companies love is the enormous population of people in Florida who are very ready, eager, and willing to work. You know, when some of these larger companies relocate down there, they start posting job openings, they are often overwhelmed by people interested in working for them, and that is a huge convenience for these companies. Another thing that these companies love is the fact that Florida is still a law and order state. Unlike some other major cities and states around the country that have become a little too politically correct and are now refusing to enforce many laws, Florida is still a law and order state. And if you're a company or even just an individual, and you're looking to invest in Florida, it's very comforting to know that that law enforcement in Florida will protect your investment. As everybody knows, it's almost impossible to run a company these days in some places like New York or California because of the insanely high taxes, the terrible law enforcement. And so the number of companies leaving those states is accelerating. And where are they going? They're going to Florida. And a lot of people are also going to Texas for the very same reasons. The next question is, why do so many criminals love Florida? Well, we've got some really interesting observations about that as well. First and foremost is the massive amount of drug money that's been pumping through that state for the last half century. You know, during the 70s and 80s, there was so much drug money pumping through Florida that a large part of that money had to be directed into legitimate businesses, legitimate real estate, and because of that, you know, there is now this enormous corporate and commercial infrastructure built up throughout the state that probably never would have been there sooner if it wasn't for, you know, the 70s and 80s and everything that took place back then. To this very day, experts believe that a lot of the tall commercial buildings and skyscrapers in South Florida were built and funded by drug money. Those buildings were often purchased by cartels who concealed their true ownership with a series of shell companies set up around the world that made it difficult, but not impossible, but difficult for law enforcement to determine, you know, who the actual owners were. You know, one of the things that the cartels have learned is that it's very easy for governments to capture and seize large transports full of cash, of drug cash. But it is more difficult for them to go after real estate and other assets which appear to be legitimate, because they first have to prove that they're owned by the cartels, and then they have to track down the owners and go through the court systems to seize ownership of those commercial assets. That's not as easy as it sounds. Another asset category that the criminals love these days are large, legitimate corporations that generate tremendous cash flow. They purchase these companies because they like the cash flow, which they can blend with their own cash flow of drug money and combine all that and just take it to the banks and legitimize it. Have you ever wondered why so many nightclubs and bars all throughout Florida that do almost no business during the weeks remain open year after year after year? Well, it's because a lot of these bars and nightclubs are secretly owned by drug dealers and cartels, and they're used to launder money, lots of money. Florida also seems to be a magnet for criminals running shady opioid clinics and retirement homes for the elderly. There are some opioid clinics in Florida that can make $50 or $100 million a year just writing prescriptions for people pretending to be sick and needing opioids. It's an enormous industry. Another reason that Florida is such a magnet for criminals is because there are so many high net worth individuals living in Florida. You know, this makes these high net worth individuals a magnet for street criminals, grifters, telemarketing con men, hookers, Ponzi schemers, all looking for their next victim. I've heard rumors that, if you're over the age of 65 and you live in Florida, then there is a good chance that someone is trying to scam you in person or by phone at least once a week. And if you're over the age of 70 and you're not being watched over by your family, then there's a good chance that you'll be scammed out of some money. A good 10% chance you'll be scammed out of some money at least once a year by all the telemarketers and con people working in the state. I've spoken to people who've been to South Beach over the last few years, and they say it has been overrun by violence. It used to be that South Beach and Miami were just problematic during spring break, but now the business owners and the community is irate over the amount of crime, the brawls, the melees, the fistfights, the riots that are taking place, on Ocean Drive and throughout the rest of the city. And this is occurring year round. And as I say, it's no longer limited to spring breaks. If you want to have a good laugh, go to YouTube and type in the following keywords: Florida street crime, Miami violence, brawls, fistfights, spring break. Just watch all the videos of all the street crime in Ocean Drive in Miami. It looks like an episode of Cops, and it's nonstop. Another thing that criminals love about Florida is how easy it is to purchase drugs down there. You can literally lay on the beach, on almost any beach, for 5 minutes, and somebody will walk by offering to sell you drugs. You can walk down the streets of Miami, and on every other corner, somebody will whisper offering to sell you some drugs. It is everywhere. So the next question is, why do so many normal, everyday homeowners want to live in Florida? Well, first of all, it's the taxes. There are no income taxes in Florida, and that's a huge savings for homeowners. The next thing people love about Florida is the affordability of the housing. You can sell your tiny home in California, a home that's probably worth $1.5 million, go to Florida, relocate to Florida, buy a mansion for $500,000, and take your remaining $1 million and put it in the bank. And that's a very appealing scenario for a lot of people. Another thing that homeowners love about Florida are their homestead laws, which make it much more difficult for creditors to take your home, if you're having financial problems. It's another measure of protection for people. Of course, there's always Florida's weather. Everybody loves Florida's weather, and that is very appealing if you want to relocate. The cost of college. Florida colleges are on average 10 to 15% cheaper than colleges elsewhere in the country. And if you have several kids, that adds up to a sizable amount of money. Another thing that people love about Florida is the lifestyle. If you've been living in the Midwest or the Northeast for the last 2 or 3 decades and you're shoveling snow every winter, you're driving on ice, and it's just gotten to you, you hate it all, and you relocate to Florida, it's really nice to be able to walk around outside year round, in a short sleeve shirt. It is just really, really nice. And that weather, it's not just something that contributes to your quality of life. There are many studies out there that prove uh, that businesses opened up in warm weather states tend to do better. Why? Because those states attract a lot of tourists, and tourists are often good for great business. One thing that everybody loves is Disney World. Disney World has become an entertainment mecca for people wanting to live in Florida, and it single-handedly draws thousands of people to that state who decide they just want to relocate someplace nice and live near the Disney magic. So with that, I want to thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.